to do a study with the, Health and Human Services to look into the genesis of chronic disease, because nobody's talking about it. The National Institute of Health or National Library of Medicine or in our public health policy, nobody's talking about what's causing this pain.
Gee, I wonder why they're not talking about it.
Well, I could give you a couple of.
You think money has anything to do with it? No way.
You're a conspiracy theorist, dude. You're down the rabbit hole.
That's my problem.
You think that just because people get paid, they do things that are shady.
Yeah, I know. That's a weird thing to think. I should stop thinking that way.
Yeah, I mean, we make $110 billion a year on type 2 diabetes. They're trying to put that out of business.
Yeah, they don't want that money.
No. They're like, hey, Stan, how do we get this off the balance sheet, bro? How do we get rid of this? Is stinking up.
So there's a business that relies on people being so disgusting that they get type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. So bad with their diet, just eating pie and drinking soda till their body just starts to cave in.
Yeah, but don't worry,
that's worth how much a year?
$110 billion. Type 2 diabetes
alone. That's not a lot of money. It's not like that would change anybody's opinions on things.
Well, I mean, a lot of people could live on that. There's a lot of people that could live on that. Bro.
Isn't that funny? A lot of people could live on what's killing other people.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Like, a lot of people are buying yachts on what is killing people.
Yes,
it's wild.
The interesting thing is look at our food stamp program, which is the SNAP program. It's one of the biggest subsidies that we have in the government. $120 billion a year. $10 billion of that is going to subsidize sodas. I mean,
they need soda. It's an important part of the food pyramid, I think.
It's right up there with Lucky Charms, right?
Lucky Charms is right above ground beef.
Yeah, and grass-fed steak, and then you get to the top, and you got soda. It's phenomenal. And then the American Heart Association just ironically comes out in favor of soda in the SNAP food program. And
we went over that, and we found out that they're paid by Pepsi and by Coca-Cola.
Wow,
it's just so dark.
Yeah,
it's so crazy.
It is.
American Heart Association gets money from Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
Yeah, I checked into my Airbnb here in Austin, which by the way, love Austin. Man. I see why you came here. We covered it all on my podcast, so I won't go down that rabbit hole. But it truly is, man. People are amazing. Food is amazing. Went to this little restaurant called The Well, which I love, and they catered all my food. But there's like a serious wellness vibe here.
Mm-hmm.
But
a lot of healthy people.
Yeah, a lot of healthy people. So I check into the Airbnb, and I go into the closet. Like the owner's closet wasn't locked, and I went into the owner's closet. Of course, it's like all Cheerios and cookies and crackers. And I pulled a couple of bottles of seed oils out. And I did a little post about it because I was like, look at all the heart-healthy labels on this.
Right.
And we talked about seed oils last time, but it's, and I get attacked a lot for saying that these polyunsaturated fatty acids are bad for you. But a lot of times it's actually not the plant itself. It's the distance from the plant to the take.
Right. You explained, because you were explaining the other day to us the process that it takes to turn rapeseed oil, which is what
canola oil, Joe.
They said rapeseed was problematic, so they changed it to canola oil. I always thought it was corn oil.
Yeah,
corn's good for you. Corn oil must be great for you.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we're using canola oil. Cool.
Oh, peanuts.
Please explain though the process, because it's so vile.
It's insane. So rapeseed, canola, is a plant. Essentially you put it in a commercial press, and it will come out gummy. And so to degum it, you use something called hexane. And hexane, if you go to the National Institute of Health or National Library of Medicine, you'll see that is a known neurotoxin. It's classified as a neurotoxin. Same as fluoride, right? Which is actually fluorosilicic acid. We'll get to that later. But so we degum it with hexane. And then you take this degummed oil and you heat it to 405 degrees, which turns it rancid. I mean, there's no mechanism on Earth for temperatures to reach that much, especially plants to encounter those kind of temperatures. So now it denatures, it turns rancid. So now it's putrefied and it smells. So now you have to deodorize it. So we deodorize it with sodium hydroxide. So we degum it with a powerful neurotoxin. We heat it to 45 degrees and turn it rancid, and then we deodorize it with a very powerful carcinogen. And then in some cases, we bleach it and bottle it and put it on the shelf. You ever go to the grocery store and you see the entire grocery aisle, it's all these like Wesson oils or vegetable oils, but they're all exactly the same color.
Mm-hmm.
Like exactly, they have that same beautiful clear hue. That's how
they look super healthy.
No.
No.
Have you squeezed 10,000 watermelons into watermelon juice and put it all on the shelf.
They would vary a little bit.
They would vary a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's no variance. And so this is a chemically controlled process, and it's again it's not back to the polyunsaturated fatty acids per se. It's the pro-inflammatory process that they cause, foam cells and the inflammation in our arterial wall, which actually calls cholesterol to the site of inflammation. And we blame cholesterol for a lot of the heart disease, atherosclerosis, arterial sclerosis, because it's at the scene of the crime, but it rarely pulls the trigger. I mean, cholesterol is kind of like fire. Right? It gets called to the fire to put the fire out.
Right.
And so the theory that if we had fewer firemen, we'd have less fires is kind of absurd. Right? But that's the theory. That's the theory in LDL cholesterol. Like, if I work in California, I could see them passing that legislation.
Yeah.
You know what we need? We need less firemen. But so the theory that if we push down the firemen, which was called to the site of inflammation, meaning we reduce the cholesterol, which was called to the site of inflammation to cause the repair, rather than ask what started the fire, that notion is about to be, I think, blown out of the water by big data. I think you're going to see big data, artificial intelligence, and early detection in the next 5 years, which is going to circumvent the entire system.
Do you think there's a possibility of removing food oils from the market?
I don't think they will ever replace
food oils, excuse me.
Yeah, seed oils. I don't think they will ever replace seed oils.
Why not?
I think what's really interesting is the chemical processing. So another really good thing, and I'm helping to author this paper with Callie Means and a bunch of other folks to present it to Bobby Kennedy in looking at the genesis of chronic disease. Because if you just, and I know lots of people have talked about this on your show, so I won't belabor the point, but if you look at the spending of $4.5 trillion a year, right, on healthcare in the United States, and then you say, well, what do we lead the world in? Well, as of December 6th, we were ranked 66th in the world in life expectancy. We lead the world in morbid obesity, type 2 diabetes, multiple chronic disease in the single biome, meaning not just our population has multiple different chronic diseases, but multiple chronic diseases in the same body, because most people don't just have one autoimmune disease, or they're not just hypertensive and diabetic. They're hypertensive, diabetic, and hypothyroid with an autoimmune, usually multiple autoimmune. We lead the world in infant mortality, maternal mortality, and so you got to ask yourself, how's $4.5 trillion a year in spending leading to these kinds of consequences? And very often, it's actually not the food, it's the distance from the food to the table. So it's not necessarily the plant, it's what we're doing to process these plants to get them on the table. And so I think what you're going to see is these GRAS guidelines, generally regarded as safe, which is essentially how the FDA decides whether or not you can micropoison the population. So we are allowed to micropoison the population, right? We're allowed to put certain amounts of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, preservatives.
That is a great way of putting it, too. It's micropoison.
Yeah.
So that's really what's happening.
It's exactly what's happening. And a lot of experts will say the dosage determines the poison. And that's largely untrue when you talk about cumulative dose toxicity, meaning if I give you this sandwich and this piece of tuna fish and it has a very small safe amount of lead or mercury, it's probably not going to hurt you, right? But if you don't methylate that metal out of your body and you keep eating that same kind of fish, I mean, nobody got mercury poisoning from a single piece of tuna fish. What they got mercury poisoning from was continuing to eat the same thing over and over and over and over again, and they got a cumulative dose toxicity, which is what a lot of foreign countries use. So in other words, I can't just say if I put, 1 drop of arsenic in this glass, is that going to kill you? It might make you mildly sick, cause an inflammatory process. Maybe it's not going to kill you. But if you drink one of those 5 times a day, 7 days a week, now you're toxic. And that's what's happened to our country. We didn't get here quickly. We got here by slowly stacking these micropoisons.
Right, but is it possible to change all of, whatever we use seed oil for? Is it possible to swap that out for olive oil or beef tallow? Or,
yes.
I know there's some companies doing, like Masa makes these great tortilla chips that
Love
are just
Masa.
organic corn,
Yeah,
tallow.
organic corn,
They taste
grass-fed beef,
like
tallow.
it too. Like you feel like you're eating food.
Yeah,
You know, we talked about those Vandy chips too.
Yeah,
Vandy chips. I love those.
I do too. I
They're
would
so
actually
good.
brought you
It's just
some.
potatoes and beef tallow with a little salt, and
Yep.
and it tastes like food.
Yeah.
Like when I eat them, I don't feel like a piece of shit. Like if I eat a bag of Doritos, I feel like a fucking loser.
Yeah.
You know, even while I'm eating, I'm like, oh, you loser, shut up. Pop my face, like, shut up. These are delicious.
You shame yourself. You're
I
like,
do.
Joe, I'm so
I do.
disappointed in you.
But isn't it possible to just replace those, or would it require? Is it one of those things like there's an issue with factory farming? Everybody thinks factory farming is disgusting when it comes to animals. Like it's vile what they do to chickens and pigs. But is it possible to give everyone cheeseburgers in food deserts without factory farming? Like have we gotten so far ahead of ourselves that we don't have sustainable regenerative agriculture as an option?
I don't think so at all.
So you think that all the foods, all the salad dressings and all the French fries and all the things that are cooked in food oil, we have enough beef tallow, we have enough olive oil, we have enough avocado oil that we could switch all those things out and everything would be great.
There is no question that we have the capacity to produce these, and we have the capacity to produce them now. I mean, a lot of these farms don't use the bones from these cattle. They don't use the hide from these cattle. They don't boil in the collagen from these cattle. And certainly are not making the tallow from the fat from the cattle that are being slaughtered.
So there's a lot of tallow that's going to waste.
A lot of tallow, a lot of bone broth, a lot of bones, a lot of cartilage. You know that's entirely going to waste. And if you look at a lot of countries, they will use the entire animal. They'll boil down the bones. They'll use the hide. They'll use the bone marrow.
It's kind of crazy because there's a big market for bone broth. There's a big market for beef tallow. Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they? I mean, they're just wasting money.
I think you have the perception that there's a big market for it because you're kind of in the know, right? You're probably in the I hate to use this term, but woke 1%.
Oh,
Right?
no.
If you went into, he's like, did he call me woke?
That sounds, it used to be cool.
when I mean woke 1%, I mean I hate that word.
Well, it's
But-
you're using it the correct way, though. You're using it the way African Americans used to use it. Black people used to call woke like you're awake. I'm woke. You can't
Yeah.
sneak that stupid shit by me.
Right.
I'm woke.
Right.
You know,
I mean,
and then the fucking white people took it over and ruined it, like a lot of things.
exactly. Did we fuck that up too?
Not us.
Wait,
Not us. But the ones with blue hair.
yeah. Now woke means a whole different.
Yeah.
Whole different
Well, now
ballgame.
it's essentially a pejorative. They can't even use it in a positive way. You know, it's that's beaten down.
But I
to the
like
point
it
where
because it's kind of
gross.
like you can just be triggered about anything now, so it's so convenient.
Yes.
You know, because I can really silence you if you start out intellectualizing me. I can just be like, dude, you're triggering me. You're hurting my feelings.
You're triggering me with
Dude,
information.
I kid you not. I've never talked about this before. I'm probably gonna lose half my audience, but
No.
I went to Harvard University for this thing, this longevity summit. A very good friend of mine. I won't mention his name because then I'll give away the event that I was at. I called my wife on the way too, and I was like, babe, I feel like I landed on Mars. I go, I gotta get out of here. And she goes, what is going on? I said, I just listened to a panel of PhDs for 4 hours debate about whether or not a microaggression is something that could happen to you that you don't recognize, that was causing a micro-trauma that the other person didn't realize they were doing, but it was still creating an unsafe environment.
I think there should be mandatory jiu-jitsu classes for those people. Mandatory jiu-jitsu.
My head was so twisted.
Here's your micro-trauma.
Yeah, when they passed the microphone to me, I got so much trouble. Yeah, and I won't say his last name, but Daniel, he's still mad at me right now because of this. They passed the microphone to me, but do you have anything to add to the conversation? So this sounds like a bunch of people. This whole panel out here. You guys sound like you boarded a spaceship and literally left Mother Earth. Because I have no idea what you're talking about. You were talking about trying to identify something that you, by its very nature, say you don't know if you have it or you don't. So let's just admit that it's a ghost. So how are we going to, we can't measure it, we can't find it, we can't prove you have it, we can't prove you don't have it. So how are we going to treat it?
What's this culture of victimization and the monetization? It's like there's status in victimization. You know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. They've essentially made it like a virtue to be a victim. So you're
Yeah.
looking for little things that have possibly, I believe there was a microaggression.
I think, you know what? I think I felt it.
Possibly rolled his eyes.
I possibly rolled
I mean, that is gonna haunt me. I need therapy now. I think he might have rolled his eyes.
And that's absolutely acceptable.
That is a microaggression, like maybe rolling your eye. Like you say something to me and I go, okay. And then I leave. Oh my God, that was a microaggression.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what I just did going, okay.
But here's
That's
the cool thing,
microaggression.
is you're kind of off the hook, because if you didn't intentionally create the microaggression, I just perceived it as
Depends on who I am. If I'm a white heterosexual cis male,
then you're
I
screwed.
got problems.
Then you're screwed. So anyway, back to the food supply. We took a U-turn there for a second. What's really interesting is if you just take a very 30,000 foot view and you say, let's just look at the broad strokes in the blue zone research, right? There's no continuity between diets in these blue zones. So it's not keto, paleo, pescatarian, vegan, vegetarian, raw food, Atkins. It's whole food, just what you were just saying.
Whole food and a lot of healthy lifestyle.
Whole food, well, the two things that were non-interchangeable were sense of purpose and community and activity until later in life. So you didn't have any of the blue zones where people didn't feel a sense of purpose and community in life. In fact, there were no such things as assisted care living facilities. Assisted care in those countries as mom and dad moved back in with kids until the day that they die. And there's a lot to be said for that, because maybe grandma's only purpose is to go out and get vegetables for dinner that night, but she has a purpose.
And she's a part of the community.
And she's also
not locked up in a home with a bunch of people who don't really care about her.
Yeah. We knew something in the mortality space, because I used to study mortality and mortality research, and we knew that if you wanted to cut somebody's life expectancy in half at any age, and I mean at any age, you put them in isolation. So as soon as you create isolation, you dramatically reduce, if not half, the life expectancy. Now, later in life, we would call this broken heart syndrome, caregiver syndrome, and these were actually very valid syndromes. So if we actually were doing the life expectancy on an elderly spouse who is still applying for insurance, or we were looking at what's called a second-to-die claim on life insurance policy, and one spouse had passed away, we would dramatically reduce the life expectancy of the second spouse. And the reason why that's important is I think that people don't realize that we are actually being isolated in plain sight, right? I mean, we are trying to create connection through our phones, we're trying to create connection through social media, and these are not human connections. In fact, you look at the rates of depression, suicide, suicidal ideation, obesity, chronic mental illness, and I think we actually have a chronic lack of mental fitness, not necessarily a mental illness crisis in this country. And if you look at the skyrocketing rates of these conditions and how they are creeping into younger and younger and younger generations, you got 9-year-olds being treated for depression now, right? So what's happening? What's happening is isolation in plain sight. We don't problem solve anymore. We don't have communities with our friends anymore. We actually don't build social connections. We've lost our connection to Mother Nature. That's why I like going out to my place in Colorado. It's probably like you like bow hunting. It's just old school connection to Mother Nature. And how freaking good do you feel?
Yeah, it's very, very good. I really wish I lived in nature. I'd really like to be living in the woods again.
I'm working on it, man. Well, you said you were trying to get something outside of town, like
I think that's the
ranch
move.
kind of.
Yeah, I think nature is a vitamin. I really do. I think it's a mental health vitamin. I think there's something about being in nature. There's a feeling you get, especially when your phone doesn't work. And you get out there and you look at your phone with 0 bars.
No, yeah.
And you're out there in like real woods. It's just like, you just feel better.
Yeah.
You just feel like more tuned in with birds and branches snapping and things going on. Coyotes, and it's like, god damn, it feels good.
We have this place in Colorado. My wife and I, she's been going to for 35 years since she was a little girl. When we got together 10 years ago, she started bringing me and my family out there. Her father's got 10 acres, her uncle's got 10 acres, and then this 50 acre piece came on the market. So we bought it. We're building these old school, like really authentic log cabins on it. And I write about this all the time, because in Miami I have this really fancy place, and I've got all this fancy equipment, red light therapy beds, hyperbarics, hydrogen beds, all this stuff. But I'll go out to this Colorado home, put on a 20-pound rucksack? I know you do a 150-pound rucksack, so I feel like a complete
Most of
pussy.
the time I do 45.
Okay.
This episode is brought to you by Visible. Now you know I tend to go down a lot of rabbit holes. I want to know everything about everything. And if you're like that, you need wireless that can keep up. Visible is wireless that lets you live in the know. It's the ultimate wireless hack. You get unlimited data and hotspot, so you're connected on the go. Plus, Visible is powered by Verizon's 5G network, meaning fast speeds and great coverage. And with the new Visible Plus Pro plan, you get premium wireless without the premium cost. And the best part, it's all digital, no storage. You can switch to Visible right from your phone. It only takes about 15 minutes, and then you manage your plan in the app. Ready for wireless that lets you live in the know? Make the switch at visible.com/Rogan. Plans start at $25 a month. For the best features, get the new Visible Plus Pro plan for $45 a month. Terms apply. See visible.com for plan features and network management details.
That's
Sometimes
man's
I do
weight.
it and I carry 50-pound kettlebells.
Oh, shit. No, I really...
Yeah.
I'm not even telling the rest
These
of
are
my
just
story.
short bursts.
You
Though.
had a
This is
great-
not like long distance. You know, it's just I just do it to tax my system.
Well, I do farmer's carries for a bit.
I do that too.
Yeah, farmer's carries. I
They're
actually like
great.
that.
But that's what I mean by
Yeah.
I think farmers carries, like suitcase carries, are actually better. You know,
What, closer
one
to?
hand, one
Oh,
hand.
oh, one hand.
Yeah, because then it makes you balance on the other side, and then you swap it out to the other side.
Oh,
It's a
okay. Yeah.
stabilization
Yeah,
thing. I've heard from a lot
stabilizing
of
the spine.
people that it's
Instead of just
actually better.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. to me,
Yeah.
Because you know you're not just load bearing the spine. Just squat
But farmers carries are amazing too. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, and I do a lot of farmer's carries. I put on this 20-pound rucksack, go out by myself, put a sidearm, in my vest, and go. It was just kind of funny. I took a picture of myself the other day, posted on social media with my sidearm. People, bananas. Because I took on.
Yeah, you don't want to get eaten by a mountain lion. It does happen.
Yeah.
It probably won't happen. But guess what? If I have a gun, it's not going to
I
happen.
just feel, it's never
Yeah.
gonna happen if I have a gun.
There's a fucking great video of a bow hunter who is being attacked by a mountain lion. And the mountain lion is like creeping up on him slowly. He's like, hey, get back, get back, get back. And you see the thing lock on him and start closing in. It's like 15 feet away, and then bang! And then you see the thing twitching, and it's got a hole in its face.
He was a
He
bow
shot
hunter.
it. But he had a pistol on
sidearm.
him. Well, that's why he had a pistol on him.
Yeah, it
'cause
happens in Colorado. I mean, bear attacks.
It fucking happens. Bear attacks are fairly rare in Colorado.
It's only when you cross the. Apparently, if you just come upon the cubs and the mother.
The
that's
real issue is not the bears that are in Colorado, though. The real issue is the bears in Wyoming and Montana, the brown bears. Brown bears are what you have to worry about. Black bears, not as much. But occasionally, like a big black bear will go after people.
Yeah, but anyway, I take a sidearm and I'll march
should.
around in there. But when I'm done, I feel like I took a limitless pill. It's just something. I totally agree with you. Something out there, and I got this little squirrel. It's so funny, man. I leave my house and start climbing up in the woods. I have this little 4-mile kind of track, and there's a squirrel. I don't know if he'll be there this year, but every year that I go out there, and he barks at me, right? And he kind of growls. It doesn't sound like a squirrel. It sounds like a little bark. And then he chews acorns off and grabs them with both hands and throws them down on me. It's so funny. And he'll follow me from limb to limb. I shit you not. And I look forward to seeing him every day. Like, I feel like he's pissed off. Maybe it's a sign of love. I don't know.
It's definitely pissed off. He doesn't love you.
Yeah.
Somebody probably hunted one of his family.
He'll take a
You know?
sidearm.
People do hunt squirrels. They eat them.
But in any case, man, I feel amazing. So, but you're right. That, at some point we have the capacity to replace these oils. We actually have a way to get back away from industrial farming and get back to local farming. I have a very good friend named Alfie Oakes, and he owns one of the more profitable grocery stores in America. It's in Naples, Florida, called Seed to Table. And he took me out by helicopter one time, and we hopped around to a bunch of his organic fields. He's got thousands of acres in the middle of the state of Florida. And he showed me how he's not only able to grow produce for less money than he would, organically, for less money than he would grow it if he had to use herbicides and pesticides and chemicals. He's able to pick it at 9 o'clock in the morning and have it on the grocery store shelf by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I watched the whole process go down. Thousands and thousands of these acres. And, white flies are the pest flies they're trying to avoid. And instead of spraying for these white flies, what they do is they just use this reflective cellophane. They run it down the rows of crops, and it creates this reflection, and it scatters them to the woods. And so now the white flies are not eating the crops. There's no herbicide. There's no pesticide sprayed on these. There's no preservatives. His team picks this stuff by 9 o'clock in the morning. It goes into a processing center, and by processing, I mean it gets washed. That's it. And then it's on a truck, and it's on the shelf by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you can grab a strawberry in this grocery store and eat it, and it was growing at 9 a.m. that morning. And there are mechanisms for us to do that. Yes, I get some stuff needs to be shipped and stored. But most regenerative farming practices are not only green and good for the environment, they're economically feasible. They actually make economic sense. And, when he talks about the fact that we've been spraying some of these fields for so many decades or so many years with these herbicides and insecticides, that there is not a pest for, in some cases, hundreds of miles, but we are still spraying for those pests. He's like, you got to start to question what the motivation is.
Yeah, probably financial. And
Probably financial.
Yeah, it's we're talking about. You said something earlier interesting that you think it's not. What was the term that you used? It's not a mental health problem. It's a lack of mental strength.
Mental fitness.
Mental fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it.
You got any of those hydrogens?
Yeah. You want a hydrogen
baby?
tablet?
Come on.
These are H2
Hook it
tabs.
up. I love these. I'm addicted.
I love these too. Yeah.
Explain to people what these are.
Hydrogen gas, I mean, this is probably my favorite biohack in the world because it'll cost you about $1 a day. These are called H2 tab. You can get them at drinkhh2tab.com. You can actually read the science on it. I think there's two people in the world now. I mean, those that have read the science and take hydrogen gas, drink hydrogen water, and those that don't, or just haven't read the science. Because hydrogen gas, first of all, it's the lightest element in the universe. It's also the most prevalent element in the universe. 10% of your body weight is hydrogen. In fact, if you took hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen, that's 96% of your mass. Okay, those four elements. So hydrogen's about 10% of your body weight. And hydrogen is not just an antioxidant, it's a selective antioxidant. Right? So if you look at oxidative stressors like nitric oxide or superoxide or hydrogen peroxide, okay, so all of these oxidative stressors, they can be good in certain amounts. You need a certain amount of nitric oxide, right, in your body, but too much nitric oxide is bad. Too much hydrogen peroxide, bad. Too much superoxide is bad. So if you were to take an antioxidant like vitamin C, and take very, very high doses of antioxidants, this can be very bad for you because you're suppressing too much oxidation in the body. You're actually suppressing these oxidative stressors too much. Hydrogen, on the other hand, uses the body's homeostatic process to suppress inflammation. So in other words, it works through something called the NRF2 pathway. It affects a protein called NRF2, which moves into the DNA, binds to the DNA, and then the DNA spits out the instructions for catalase, superoxide dismutase, and glutathione. So in other words, you're actually using the body's regulatory system to actually control inflammation instead of externally trying to control inflammation. And the second thing it does is it targets the only oxidative free radical that I think all of the science points to as which is hydroxyl radical, having no use in the body. So it selectively targets that and regulates the rest of the inflammatory process by using the body's homeostasis. So I guess a very long-winded way of saying that hydrogen gas can go anywhere in the body. It reduces inflammation, improves circulation, improves memory. There's a really interesting study published on the Journal of Experimental Gerontology, and it was published in November of 2021. And most, these clinical research studies, they'll look at younger populations, like healthier younger populations. But this actually looked at a 6-month study on hydrogen water versus non-hydrogen water in 70-year-old and older folks. And they use something called TET2 to measure methylation. They measure cognitive function, sleep scores, sit-stand ratios, how well they're able to sit and stand. telomere lengths and their chromosomes. And the really fascinating thing about this study is it was done during COVID. So these seniors were basically imprisoned, right? So they were not mobile, and the only difference between the groups that they controlled for was the presence of hydrogen water. At the end of the 6-month period during the lockdown, the control group had lost 11% in their telomeres. The non-control group had gained 4%. They had better short-term recall, better cognitive scores, better circulation, improvement in cardiac markers, improvement in inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. I think it's the greatest biohack on earth. That and like some sea salt and some amino acids, like a perfect amino. I mean, just covering your bases. I think those are your foundational basics for optimal health.
And it's like delicious. It comes in
so
good
good.
flavors, and it's easy to drink. It's like a pain-free thing that you can do.
You know, you can
Inexpensive.
bathe in it too. You can actually bathe in hydrogen gas.
How many tabs do you put in the water?
you can actually put what's called a hydrogen bomb, which just looks like a big bath bomb. It just creates hydrogen gas. It's elemental
What
magnesium.
does it do for you when you bathe in it?
It goes right transdermal. It goes right to the skin. So remember, hydrogen is the smallest, lightest element that we know of, right? So it will go right transdermal, and these hydrogen gas will form in between water molecules. So water molecule is H2O, but hydrogen gas can actually exist outside of the water molecule. And when you put excess hydrogen gas into the water, it will go right transdermal. And I have 2 of these baths at my house. I never talked about it like on social media, so I guess I'm about to talk about it now. But I have literally put people into these tubs. I'm kidding you not, crippled with arthritis, and they will skip out of my unit like they won the lottery. It's incredible. I mean,
So transdermal reduction of inflammation in joints from these
Yes.
hydrogen bombs. How long does it last?
or from a hydrogen bath. You can get these machines. I mean, one for your house is about $7,500, $8,000. They make some that make nanoparticles or nanobubbles, which are about 1/500th the diameter of a human pore. So if you run these things on your face, it'll actually push all the sebum out of your skin. It'll get rid of dandruff, psoriasis, eczema. If you have any kind of inflammatory condition, like knees, hips, shoulder, rotator cuff, arthritis, low back, bathing in hydrogen gas can be one of the most therapeutic things that you do.
Really? Can you add it to a cold plunge?
You can add it to a cold plunge. And what's interesting about adding it to a cold, in fact, I use this Cold Life cold plunge, and I've got these guys trying to see if we can incorporate the hydrogen gas into the cold plunge. So where the motor pulls the cold water out, it's going to send it into a hydrogen generator and then push it back into the tub, because as the temperature drops in water, you can saturate more gas. So a 48-degree, we'll quote me exactly on this, but a 48-degree cold plunge will hold about twice as much gas as a 102-degree, warm tub. So if you were like to just take like a warm bath,
Right.
so you're going to be cold plunging for 3 to 6 minutes every day, or that's what you and I do. You might as well be in there with hydrogen gas. And so I'm working with these guys from Cold Life to see if we can plumb these hydrogen generators. And basically, it creates the hydrogen gas by taking distilled water and breaking distilled water apart, and then throwing the gas into the water. And it is noticeably different when you bathe in this gas or not. Like I had Sean Ryan over to my house for a podcast one time, and he's all banged up from being a Navy SEAL, and he's got nips and bibbles all over his body. And he just thought it was really weird because I was like, dude, you gotta get my bathtub.
This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. Some things are complicated: the human mind, relationships, life. But what's not complicated is looking and feeling good with MeUndies underwear. If you're a longtime listener, you probably heard me talk about MeUndies before. I swear by them. I wear their stuff all the time, and I can't recommend them enough. Seriously, their underwear feels good while giving me the support that I need. And I can't mention MeUndies without talking about their contoured pouch and ball caddy. Confidence is key, and you're guaranteed to feel that with a pair of these. They're comfortable, supportive, and make you look good. Or go with another one of their briefs. There's plenty to choose from. I promise you, you can't go wrong. I like everything I've gotten from them so far. Plus, MeUndies has even more options when it comes to sizes, colors, and prints. You're bound to find something you like. Go classic with a pair of black or blue underwear, or mix it up with a fun print. If you're a coffee fan like me, they've got a hilarious fuck offy print. Now, as much as I've been talking about their underwear, MeUndies also has some great loungewear. It's made with the same soft material so you can be comfortable head to toe, which, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm kicking back at home, I want to be wearing something I can relax in. They're also great for a workout. Try them out yourself. If you're not totally satisfied with your first pair of underwear, it's on MeUndies. Good things come in big packages at MeUndies. Get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping on orders of $75 or more at MeUndies.com/Rogan. Enter the promo code Rogan. That's MeUndies.com/Rogan. Code Rogan for 20% off. MeUndies, comfort from the outside in.
He's talked about it before. Sean, big shout out, brother. But he's like, dude, I just met you, man. And I was like, I go, no, it's okay. I'm not going to get in there with you. All right. I'll sit on the chair outside the tub. He's like, that freaks me out a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. I said, dude, I gave him a pair of shorts. So, because I was like, does anything on your body hurt? Did your knees, your hips, your shoulders, does anything hurt? And he's like, dude, fucking everything on my body hurts. So, it's like, get in there, man. And I put him in there for 25 minutes. He said it was like the first time he had slept 8 hours and woken up without pain in probably 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah. John Jones, same thing. I mean, John Jones has been very public about working with me. I've been talking to him in a little while, but right before his last fight, I brought him one of these hydrogen machines to bathe in, and we just set up the tub at his house. And we ran hydrogen gas into the tub. So we would do red light therapy. He would drink hydrogen water, and he would bathe in this hydrogen gas. And it was about 15 or 20 days after I kind of parachuted into his camp and set all this up that he texted me. He was like, "Holy shit, brother! I can't believe I'm out of pain. I'm adding a 6th day to my training routine. I'm waking up not in pain. I'm sleeping better." So it's really incredible what hydrogen gas can do in the body, and don't take my word for it. I mean, there actually is a really interesting study published by Dr. Tyler LeBaron, who's a PhD, and I think his PhD is in molecular hydrogen. So I should tease him about where he got that from, that he got a PhD in hydrogen. But where did you bang a left that you decided I'm going to get a PhD in hydrogen? But he published a study looking at electrolyzed alkaline water, and when they removed the hydrogen gas, all of the benefits of alkaline water went away. So the benefits from alkaline water are coming from the excess presence of hydrogen gas, and even when you add hydrogen gas to regular water, it will drop the ORP. It will make the oxidative reduction potential negative, so it has more capacity to donate electrons. So I just think it's a phenomenal discovery, and it's dirt cheap.
When you were telling me that these bottles, water bottles that generate hydrogen, they're great in the beginning, but that over time they deteriorate. Would the same issue happen with the hydrogen generators that you would use for the cold plunges?
They're a lot more robust. They're a commercial generator, so they're not actually working under pressure. So the water flows through these. So a lot of the ways that you create high part per million hydrogen gas in these water bottles, and I actually just won. I'm about to put a press release out about it. I actually just won a $16 million civil judgment against a fake hydrogen water bottle company that used my name, image, and likeness to run a bunch of ads and sold tens of millions of dollars in these bottles. But essentially, at the bottom of these bottles, there's something called a proton exchange membrane. And this proton exchange membrane comes in contact with the water through electrolysis, and it creates the hydrogen gas. The problem with these bottles is that this electrolysis process, if you put tap water in there and use chlorine, can actually create chlorine gas. You can also create something called hypochloric acid. So what happens is, over time, the bottles that I tested, because I used to be a huge fan of these bottles, and I carried them everywhere, and I would notice that it didn't bubble as much, 4 or 5 months after I had the bottle, and so I sent it to be tested, And lo and behold, these proton exchange membranes break down over time. So the first time you use the bottle, you're getting very high part per million hydrogen. But 4 or 5 months later, you're getting almost none. Maybe 6 months later, you might be getting zero.
Could you just swap out the membrane and continue to use the same bottle, or would you have to use a new bottle?
They don't send you a new proton exchange membrane. Now, some of them you can screw off the bottom, and they theoretically can send it to you. But they're expensive. They're like $250, $300. I mean, an H2 tab, like a hydrogen tablet, will cost you $1 a day.
Right, and so it gives you more.
And it gives you a higher part per million than almost all those bottles. And it's consistent. It's high dose hydrogen gas that's exactly consistent. So every single time I put one of those tablets in the water, it's a consistent dose of hydrogen gas. And I used to get a lot of shit online because I was promoting these bottles so heavily because I believed in them tremendously. But the average person's like out of pocket $250, $300.
Right. So this is a lot more financially cost effective.
Yeah.
So with the cold plunge thing, you're saying because it's a commercial unit, it would work differently and it'd be more robust.
Well, it's not using pressure.
Okay.
Right. It's circulating through this machine and it's creating, using electrolysis and creating the hydrogen gas going back to the tub because you don't need. You're not trying to drink a therapeutic dose. You're trying to bathe in a dose. You don't need as high part per million, so you don't need the pressure. But the really cool thing is because if you do it in a cold plunge, and when I pull this off, I'll send you one. If you do it in a cold plunge, because as the temperature drops, the more you dissolve more gas in that volume of liquid. So ideally, you would have the hydrogen generator outside your cold plunge. Let your cold plunge run and fill with hydrogen gas. I mean, you're getting in there for the anti-inflammatory response anyway, a lot of times, plus the brown fat activation, cold shock protein release, and all that, peripheral vasoconstriction, all of that. But you would now be exposing yourself to very high doses of hydrogen gas. You'd feel amazing in that. When I bathe in that hydrogen gas, so my wife, Sage, had a really bad car accident right before we met 10 years ago, and she severely damaged her spine, her L5S1, and ended up having a spinal fusion. And so her L5S1 is fused. And even though she's thin, she's fit, she gets a lot of low back pain. And when her back pain flares up, there's no chance she's living. But when we put her into that hydrogen nanobath, 25 minutes in there, she sleeps like a little baby. It's very calming too. It's that shifting you from that sympathetic state, that kind of fight or flight, to that parasympathetic state of rest and digest. You can feel that the effects of that hydrogen gas when it goes transdermal and starts to relax you. Feels.
Well, it seems like the more effective way is to do it in a warm tub, though, because you can stay in there for longer, so you get more exposure. So you would get less hydrogen, but more exposure than the 3-minute cold plunge.
Yeah, this is where I like to see some data, which I don't have. So I do know that if the water is colder, you're going to dissolve more gas because you're going to have a higher part per million in cold water than you are in warm water. But then you got to look at what's happening in warm water. You're probably having your pores are dilated. You've got a little vasodilation. You probably have better surface circulation in your skin. So you might be actually carrying more of the hydrogen through the skin. I don't know. Versus when you're in a cold plunge, you're going to have that peripheral vasoconstriction. Right. You're still going to get hydrogen through the skin because it's a higher dose. But I don't have any clinical data to say that one's better than the other.
Have you done the cold plunge hydrogen?
Oh yeah, 100%.
You did it with a bath bomb?
I did it. I didn't do it with a bath bomb. I did it with the one in my house that I actually have 3 of these machines. I did it with the one in my house that recirculates it. You throw a hose over one side, and it sucks the water out of your cold plunge, and then you throw a hose over the other side and it puts the hydrogen gas back in.
Well, how long does the process take to hydrogenate?
I let it run for like 15 or 20 minutes because I wanted it to be really saturated, and the water looks kind of milky. In fact, I did it. I had Laura Trump over for. We shot this Fox News event on or for her show, for her Laura Trump show, and I did it for us to do this cold plunge shoot. I added the hydrogen gas to the cold plunges before we got in there. It felt amazing getting out of there. Now I'm trying to actually plummet right into the cold plunge, so it's just in line. So it just runs either all the time, or I can turn a valve and turn the hydrogen gas on and have the gas go into go into the cold plunge.
So that's the next thing. But right now, for people, you can just go get these hydrogen bath bombs.
You can get these hydrogen bath bombs.
And where would you get one of those?
Drink H2 Tab.
Oh, so you have
drinkh2tab.com.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, if you go there, you can get the bath bomb. I mean, try it. I mean, just throw one of those bath bombs in there, and feel how much different your body feels when you're bathing in hydrogen gas. It's incredible. I really feel like it is one of the best hacks that so few people are using. I mean, so many people are on anti-inflammatories. So many people are suffering from inflammation, not just neural inflammation in the brain, but non-specific markers of inflammation like C-reactive protein, homocysteine, that are causing all kinds of havoc. I mean, you think about the fact that about 70% of our circulation is not done by our heart. And our heart circulates about 30% of the blood in our body. The other 70% of the circulation is an activity called vasomotion. Right? Think of a snake swallowing a mouse. And we don't really cater to this part of our circulatory system.
Explain what you're saying. A snake swallowing a mouse?
So think of a snake. So if the heart doesn't circulate roughly 7% of the blood in our body, how is that circulation occurring? Because obviously blood is still moving. You have about 63,000 miles of blood vessel in your body. And so your heart is not strong enough in a single contraction. Your left ventricle, your heart that's ejecting that blood, is not strong enough to push the blood through 63,000 miles of vessel. And so how does the majority of this circulation occur? Well, the majority of our circulation is microvascular, right? So microvascular circulation does not move blood by pressure. It moves blood by something called vasomotion or vasomotor. And the best way I can describe vasomotion or vasomotor is to think of a snake swallowing a mouse. And the reason why I say that is because there's no pressure coming in the front of the snake, right? It's not being pushed down the snake's throat. It's being muscularly moved down the snake's throat. So it's a wave-like motion, right? It's this wave-like motion called vasomotor or vasomotion. And vascular laxity, how laxity that's in your vessels, matters. Your blood viscosity matters. And inflammation matters. This is why when you look at the percentage of high blood pressure diagnoses, for example, if you were to just Google what percentage of hypertension, primary hypertension, essential hypertension, or high blood pressure is idiopathic, right, of unknown origin, you'd see that 85% of all high blood pressure hypertensive diagnoses are idiopathic. We don't know the origin. And so we examine these people's heart, EKG, EEG, heart sounds, lung sounds, maybe a dye contrast study, maybe a CT angiogram, maybe some other kind of diagnostic heart imaging. We can't find anything wrong with the heart. And we medicate the heart anyway, generally for a crime it's not committing, when there's an 85% chance it's actually something other than the heart. And we never look to the microvascular circulation. We never look to the 70% of our circulation that's actually not done by our heart. What are we doing to cater to that 70% of our circulation? Well, things like resveratrol, hydrogen gas, lowering our homocysteine, which is, for most people, is very simple to do. I use an amino acid called trimethylglycine to help people metabolize homocysteine because those microvasculature is very susceptible to high levels of homocysteine. And there's so many people that have ailments that are consequences of poor circulation, and we're treating something completely different. So, for example, poor focus and concentration lots of autoimmune conditions. If you look at the circulation in the brain, liver, lungs, pancreas, kidneys, you'll see that the majority of this circulation is microvascular. I've talked about why you and I both had a positive experience, for example, with red light. What is red light doing to our eyes? Is it fixing the rods, the macula, the cones, the retina? Was there something damaged that red light fixed? No, it just restored healthy vasomotor activity at the back of your eye, which is why I never wear protection in a red light bag. Now, am I saying a red light bag is going to cure your eyesight? No. It's a beat up for that. But red light therapy is extraordinarily good for vasomotor circulation. Why do you think it improves your skin, the collagen, the elastin, the fibrin? Why do you think it reduces fine lines and wrinkles? Why does it improve Why can it improve our eyesight? Because it restores healthy vasomotor activity. And there's so much microvasculature in our body that we don't really cater to this entire segment of our circulatory system. Think about how small a capillary, an artery, has to be to carry a fluid to the edge of the lung, exchange a gas with the inside of the lung, pull that gas into the fluid, and not bleed into the lung. So just think about how tiny that tube has to be, and how many of those you have to have. Because don't forget, right outside of your lungs, you got fluid. Those alveoli are grabbing gas and throwing that into a fluid. Well, at some point, that pipe has to meet a piece of tissue. How is it not bleeding into that tissue? It is that small. It's microvascular. This is also where hydrogen gas comes into play. I don't know where I was going at that point, but I just find it fascinating that we've got so many things that we can do to cater to a lot of these ailments that people chalk up to a consequence of aging, and they can be as simple as catering to that portion of your circulatory system.
It would be so fascinating to run a long-term study on twins, identical twins, and have one person just eat standard American pie and the other person follow all these protocols. Hydrogen gas, fitness, healthy food, no seed oil, no drinking, and just see.
Yeah.
What do they look like after
10 years. Yeah, or 20 years. 20 years would be wild.
Wild.
Be like sending one of them to space, and it's so funny because, we're so wrapped around our medical system that's really 50, 60 years old, 70 years old, and how important randomized clinical trial is, and placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial that's been peer-reviewed, and all of this. But we negate the Eastern philosophies that very often have been around for thousands of years. And I almost lend more validity to something that's actually stood the test of time. Like something that doesn't work is not going to last 1,000 years. By virtue of the fact that it doesn't work. When we were in the mortality space, we never used randomized clinical trials. We used big data. And I think what you're about to see now, that I was alluding to before, is we've built an entire system on, the most rigorous scientific study being the randomized placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial. So that is the gold standard. If it hasn't been through this process, it is not valid. Well, we've never done randomized clinical trials on parachutes. But I wouldn't jump out of an airplane. Who wants to be in that? Who wants to be in the control group? Hey, Stan.
Yeah.
You line up here. You're getting a knapsack and a prayer book, and we're getting a parachute.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point. There's some things you really can't run randomized controlled studies on.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we just have data, right? Mm-hmm. We have really good data. And one of the things I used to get just absolutely slaughtered for was I spoke out about the simple LDL hypothesis of cholesterol, saying that there is no correlation between elevated levels of LDL cholesterol on its own and cardiovascular disease. You had to have corresponding increases in triglyceride. You had to have inflammatory factors. You usually had to have other metabolic factors like hypertriglyceridemia, hyperinsulinemia, and yet everybody, would really come after me for that. And now we're starting to see that the data on statins is really falling apart. Big data is starting to tell us that the extension of life is near zero, but the extension of all-cause mortality is near zero. And then the complications downstream, which we never study. I mean, you'll never find a randomized clinical trial looking at more than one pharmaceutical compound in the same biome. Yet almost everybody at the age of 60 is on 5 or more prescriptions. But we don't study prescriptions in concert with one another. We study them independently. We say, okay, if you have high cholesterol, you're on a statin. Okay, that's independent. If you have your hemoglobin A1C is over 6.4, you're now insulin dependent. Okay, so now you're on insulin. And you've been a little sad lately, so now you're on a SSRI. And your thyroid is hypofunction, so now you're also on a Synthroid or levothyroxine or Armour-thyroid. And your blood's gotten a little thick because you're on hormone therapy, so now you are on a blood thinner. We've never studied the compounding effect of all of these different pharmaceuticals in the same biome. We just assume that the randomized clinical trial in these independent silos is valid, even though we're going to smack all of these things together. And one of the things that we learned in the mortality space was the more pharmaceuticals you were on, the easier it was for us to predict your life expectancy. It was extraordinarily accurate. For example, if somebody started a corticosteroid, which is very common for rheumatoid arthritis and other forms of joint pain, if you started a corticosteroid, you had, by our data, 6 years and 1 day until you were getting a joint replacement.
Jeez.
6 years and 1 day.
That's the average?
That was the average. So let's say, for example,
So why is that?
because initially corticosteroids are anti-inflammatory, but then they eat the joint like a termite.
Oh, God.
And we knew this in professional sports, and a lot of careers were ended early from cortisone injections. A lot of athletes had their careers actually end early because they got too many cortisone injections.
How many is too many?
It sort of depends on the joint and the location.
One of them can be beneficial?
One of them can be very beneficial. In the acute phase of pain or injury, they can be very beneficial. But what they used to do is, because these were repetitive use injuries, and very often they would just dose the athlete up before a game. So, Joe Theismann. Joe Montana. He's one of those careers that ended early, very likely because of cortisone injections. And you keep injecting the same ligamentous tissue with cortisone, eventually you will weaken that tissue and it will snap. First it has an anti-inflammatory reaction, but then it starts to break down the cartilage like a termite. In fact, it was so accurate that very often what would happen is people would get misdiagnosed with conditions like rheumatoid because they had the same symptomology as rheumatoid, but what they actually had was a long-term clinical deficiency in vitamin D3. And you would see that they would have single-digit vitamin D3 for decades, and then all of a sudden they would start to present with symptoms that mimicked rheumatoid. They would say, "Hey doc, my soles of my feet and ankles are sore when I get out of bed in the morning to go take my first pee. I feel like I had a workout the night before when I haven't. My low back hurts, and my knees and hips and shoulders are stiff. Now it spread to my upper back. And lately it's kind of hard to make a really tight fist." If you give those symptoms to the wrong primary care doctor, maybe without doing any confirming diagnosis with SED rates, with RA factors, that goes, "You know what, Joe, you've got rheumatoid arthritis. But don't worry, I'm going to put you on something called a corticosteroid. You're going to take this pill every morning, and you're going to be fine. Methotrexate, whatever it is." And initially you feel great because it kills the inflammation, but then it starts to erode the cartilaginous surface. So if you think about the fact that you had a nutrient deficiency that you're now being treated with a pharmaceutical, and 6 years and 1 day later, now by the way, the methotrexate, for example, will give you a gene mutation. It will mimic a gene mutation called MTHFR.
Oh, that one.
That one, the motherfucker gene. Yeah.
Motherfucker gene.
Yeah, the motherfucker gene. So even if you don't have MTHFR, let's try one of those. Yeah, I might as well try it. Even if you don't have MTHFR, if you take methotrexate, you inhibit your folate metabolism. Cheers, bud. Hydrogen gas, coffee. I actually saw you sniffing something on one of your podcasts.
Smelling salts?
What was that? I don't want to do it, by the way.
You can do it.
No, I'm
Jamie,
not.
shuck one over
No.
there.
I
Give me
brought
a
it up
freshie.
the wrong time.
Give me a freshie.
I'm not.
Here we go.
I just see all this shit over here.
Oh, this is a fresh one. So this one hasn't been opened yet.
What is that?
This is, do you know who Juju Mufu is? Crazy.
Juju Mufu?
Yeah, well, he's an influencer, but he's like very impressive athlete. Like super jacked.
Dude, if you've got a name like Juju
unbelievably
Mufu,
fit
you got to
guy.
be able to beat it.
Incredibly flexible. This is the guy.
Oh, yeah.
He's a freak. Like a real
Yeah.
freak. For sure he's not natural. There's not a fucking chance in hell. But I don't care. But what he makes this stuff. We have no affiliation with him. We buy it. We're not sponsored. So people,
Okay.
oh, you making money off that, bro? No.
Money off.
No, I'm not making.
Dude, I'm scared, dude. I saw Theo Vaughn almost like,
Brian Simpson took his headphones off and ran out of the room.
no, dude, I'm not getting anywhere near that. No. I'm gonna sniff it with the top on.
Just
Really?
the bag. Oh, and it's
Give me the
sealed.
bag. I'll do the bag.
Just take a sniff of the bag. Ugh.
This is so wrong.
It is wrong.
Oh my God,
That's
dude!
nothing. That's nothing. That's just the bag that the smelling salts have been sitting in.
Oh my God!
So what powerlifters do is they take a sniff of this shit right before they lift weights. You ready? Here we go.
No, I'm not. There's zero chance.
Woo! Oh lordy!
Dude, there is
Come on, bro.
zero chance I'm
Get on
doing
in.
that.
Get on in, bro. Come on, reach for
Oh.
it. Peer pressure. Take it. Get it about 6 inches from the nose. Take a haul. It's good for you. I can't guarantee
Oh
it's
my
good
God.
for you. No, that was
No,
nothing.
that got me,
Oh,
dude.
you're
That
such a
came in from
baby.
the
Come on, you're a
bottom.
biohacker. You're a real man. Get in there. Take a sniff.
Yeah,
The
I'm a
sniff.
real man. I don't
Get in
do
there.
this.
Get in there, bro. Get in there. 1, 2, 3, go. Sniff. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh God, the eye.
That's what I'm talking about. Let's go. And that was a freshie. The fresh ones are the really hard ones. We have these in the green room at the comedy club. People get addicted. They're all taking
I
sniffs
think
before
I
they go on
lost sight
stage.
in my left eye.
Yeah, it'll come back better. Come back stronger. I have no data to support that, by the way.
Nothing. Now I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole of that.
You're going to want
prefer
another
my
one in about
hydrogen
5
water.
minutes. About 5 minutes, you're going to say, give me round 2. Yeah.
Where were we, dude? We were actually something important.
Anyway, I wonder. I did
bar, I think.
I did want to ask you about cholesterol before I forget. Where did the narrative come from that there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, and that HDL is good, LDL is bad? You want to lower your LDL, and you want to take a statin. Where did all this?
So you know, high density lipoprotein and low density lipoprotein. The HDL, the high density lipoprotein, is generally considered the good cholesterol, and the LDL, the low density, or VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, is considered the bad cholesterol because they're softer, right? But what we know now is that the size of the cholesterol molecule matters a lot. In other words, the smaller the particulate size of cholesterol, the easier it is to cross into the arterial wall. Gets eaten by macrophage, and it forms something called a foam cell, which is essentially this foam cell process of oxidized cholesterol is what is the genesis of narrowing of the arteries. Right? But again, we have to remember that cholesterol is called to the site of inflammation. So if you had two people, one with cholesterol of 100 and LDL cholesterol, and another one with cholesterol 129, does the person with 129 have a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease? No. Does the person of 129 have a greater risk of a cardiovascular event? No, just because they have elevated LDL cholesterol. Now, if you start to look at other markers like C-reactive protein, which is a great marker for cardiovascular risk, if you look at triglyceride cholesterol ratio, because remember, fat, triglyceride, is largely transported around the body on the surface of cholesterol. So if cholesterol was a tennis ball, the fuzzy yellow surface would be a fat triglyceride. And if you remember from high school geometry, as the size of a sphere gets smaller, its surface area to volume ratio goes up. So what that means is if I had two baskets, dude, I could still, that thing is, I gotta seal this thing, dude. It's like, you go blind in my left eye. Try to be smart, I can't see out of my left eye. What is it?
It's a good question.
Ammonia? It's no joke, man. I remember my clinic when Dr. Sardi used to tape these things to the wall because she would do these shoulder injections on people and they would get woozy. She would just crack one of those.
They used to use them for boxers when they got knocked out. When they got rocked and they get into the corner, they give them smelling salts and wake right up. Wow. Not really, but.
So let's say you had two basketballs of cholesterol. This is an oversimplified version for the audience, but you have two basketballs of cholesterol, and they're covered in fat, okay, a triglyceride. And let's say I add more triglyceride to the bloodstream, right? Which happens when you eat high sugar, high glycemic carbohydrate. Why? Because part of insulin's role is to block forms of energy metabolism that would allow you to burn fat, or at least slow those pathways down. So essentially you have two basketballs of cholesterol. And now I want to add more fat to the table. Those two basketballs become 4 softballs. If I add more triglyceride to the table, they become 8 baseballs. If I add more triglyceride, they become 16 golf balls. And if I continue to raise triglyceride, they'll become 32 little BBs. So the point is, the amount of cholesterol stayed stable. The amount of triglyceride went up. As the amount of triglyceride went up, the size of the cholesterol molecule got smaller. So the 2 basketballs and the 32 BBs are the same volume of cholesterol, same nanogram per deciliter of cholesterol, just vastly different sizes. Those 32 BBs, very dangerous. 2 basketballs, very little danger. One is actually a marker for longevity. One is a marker for cardiovascular disease, and it is the same amount of cholesterol, just different sizes. So different sizes.
I got my blood drawn a couple years ago, and the doctor asked me if I was on cholesterol medication. He said, "Your cholesterol is really low." He goes, "Are you on medication?" I said, "No, but I eat mostly meat."
Yeah, your triglycerides would usually go down. Your LDL cholesterol will go up if you're on a ketogenic diet. Dr. I think it's Nadir Singh is his name. Did an unbelievable, he's a cardiologist, did an unbelievable YouTube video on this. I actually did a podcast with Dr. Asim Malhotra, who is a cardiologist. Has he been here too?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Love that guy.
Hey, shout out to Asim. He's incredible guy. And Asim would tell you the same thing, that he fought the British Medical Journal and got publications that he was trying to have published, pulled, because he was fighting the narrative on statins, one of the biggest drugs in the world. We knew in the mortality space that the centenarians that we were processing death claims, I don't recall a time during my career when we had a death claim on centenarian, somebody over the age of 100, that did not have elevated levels of LDL cholesterol at the time of their death, because very often these people would die either in hospitals or assisted care living facilities, and we'd process the death claim, and in order to get the death claim processed, you'd have to know, day, date, time, location, cause of death. And we'd have to get a death certificate. And these people were dying with elevated levels of LDL cholesterol, which you would think, well, wouldn't they have died a lot younger of cardiovascular disease? And now the data is starting to come out to support these other metabolic issues like hyperinsulinemia, hypertriglyceridemia, high blood sugar. That these are villains that precede cholesterol, attaching to the arterial wall. And so when we talk about metabolic health, we really shouldn't just isolate LDL cholesterol. We should be looking at our blood pressure, our abdominal obesity, our sugars mainly, whether or not, what our fasting blood glucose is, what the 3-month average of our blood sugar is, our hemoglobin A1C, making sure that's below, preferably 5.4. Looking at our insulin, because insulin resistance develops a long time before a lot of these things show up, and looking at other inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and just generalized markers of inflammation, because most people are eating a very pro-inflammatory diet. And this is why you can't isolate one thing and say seed oils are what's killing Americans, vaccines are what's killing Americans, aluminum vaccines, or fluoride in drinking water. It's the cumulative dose toxicity of all of these things. Our water is toxic. And we have fluoride, we have chlorine, we have PFAs, polyfluoroalkyls, we have microplastics, we have bisphenols. I actually did a test on myself and my entire family called a Vibrant Wellness Test. And it's a blood and urine test, and essentially it tells you whether you got mold, mycotoxins, heavy metals, all of these different things. The amount of BPAs in my blood, and I would consider myself pretty on top of my diet game. The amount of BPAs, there were traces of jet fuel, there were aflatoxins, there were traces of jet fuel.
From all your flying?
Like accelerants, like aerosol accelerants, maybe from fly a lot. My daughter had it in her blood too, and so did my wife. And then we all had very similar species of mold, which we got rid of, and I felt a lot better.
And it was in your home?
It was actually in my daughter's apartment. We actually ended up having our doctor write a letter and break her lease, and we moved her to an apartment right next to us in Coconut Grove in Florida. But she was starting to have, and she's a nurse, and she was starting to have these strange symptoms, just brain fog. Her joints were just killing her in the morning. By the end of the day, her ankles were swollen. Her mood started to collapse, like the peaks and valleys of mood kind of went away. She was, I was bringing her over to the house, and obviously as a biohacker, I'm trying to solve everything. So I was like, we got to do this viral wellness test medicine. We got to figure out what's going on. And then boom, the mold just jumped off the chart. Our youngest daughter too was suffering from recurrent sore throat, and that viruses and bacteria and mold have been mortal enemies for years. Think penicillin and bacteria, right? And so we live in the mold capital of the world, and very often when you get mold toxicity, it's not just a constant infection. It has a latent phase, a dormant phase, and then a sporulating phase. And so these mold infections, which a lot of doctors will tell you are complete nonsense, are absolutely valid. There are people that right now that have severe brain fog, they have joint pain, they have really poor focus and concentration, short-term memory issues, they've got hormone imbalance, they've got water retention, and they got swollen ankles, and they cannot really figure it out. And they'll do a standard blood test, and you don't see this on a standard blood test. And when you do something like a Vibrant and you look at these this mold toxicity, you get rid of it, and you see the entire blood panel, comes back into optimal ranges, and they feel amazing. Just like my daughter, we did EBO2, we did sauna, we did gut binders, activated charcoal binders, high doses of glutathione, and over the next few weeks, we slowly walked, this mold right out of her system. But people suffer from this all the time. In fact, I've been deep down the rabbit hole of a lot of the foundations of these autoimmune diseases because in my previous clinic, we had 150, 160,000 patients come through our clinic system, and nearly everyone that we saw that had autoimmune disease was told by their doctor, you just woke up one day and your immune system went haywire. Right, so you have Crohn's disease because one day you woke up and your immune system is manufacturing antibodies to your colon, or you have hypothyroid because you woke up one morning and your immune system is manufacturing antibodies to your thyroid. So now you have Hashimoto's, or the lack of one gland in your eye makes your glands, or your blood, you have lupus. And we immediately just assume that God made a mistake, that the immune system is malfunctioning. Instead of taking a step back and saying, what if actually the immune system is acting properly? What if God didn't make a mistake? What if it's attacking the colon for a reason? We just have to figure it out. And if you just eliminated 4 things, mold mycotoxin, heavy metals, viruses, and parasites, just those 4 categories, I believe you would get to the majority of the genesis of autoimmune diseases. Just, some of these autopsy studies on multiple sclerosis, for example, were 100% positive for certain colonies of helminths. Helminths, which are parasites, and these helminth colonies, or the larvae from these, were actually in the myelin sheath of 10 of 10 autopsies that they did on multiple sclerosis patients. I'm not by any way means saying that everybody that has multiple sclerosis has parasitic infection, but there are healthy parasites. There's categories of helminths that are very, very healthy, and some of the underdeveloped countries in the world where actually they have these healthy parasites, which we've wiped out for the large part here, they don't get multiple sclerosis, or they have very, very low incidence of multiple sclerosis. And one of the theories is that because we have disrupted the balance of not only bacteria but parasites in our gut, specifically TSO parasites, which are healthy parasites, that the pathogenic parasites proliferate and they burrow, their larvae burrow into the myelin sheath, and they are part of the genesis of multiple sclerosis. My whole point in saying that is if you take any pathogen, let's just take this one right here. I don't know what this is. It looks like a Donald Trump coin. So I don't know if the audience can see this, but let's say this was a mold spore or mycotoxin, or this was a heavy metal, or even a virus, and this was a healthy cell. you see that they don't hide like this, right? Metals, mycotoxins, mold, viruses, even in some cases parasites, they don't hide outside the cell like this. They hide like this. And inside the cell. I mean, but when a virus, when the nucleocapsid protein of a virus attaches to a cell and injects its DNA, that's the way that it takes over that cell. Kind of like being bitten by the zombie, right? I mean, a virus is not a living thing. It's an envelope that's wrapped around DNA. But when that envelope attaches to the cell wall and it squirts the DNA inside, now the virus has taken over the host cell, right? So it's inside the cell. The point is that the immune system is not after this. It's not after the cell. It's after this. So how does it get to this? It has to kick down this wall. It has to break through this cell wall. And very often, in order to do that, it needs to manufacture an antibody to this cell. If you look, for example, at for Hashimoto's, which a lot of people have, these people have Hashimoto's and they're told, okay, well, you woke up one day and your immune system decided to attack the thyroid. You're manufacturing antibodies to your thyroid. And so, well, why is it attacking my thyroid? Well, we don't know. Let's look at your family history. Oh, your mom's sister had it, and your dad's brother had it. Oh, you have familial Hashimoto's. Even though there is no gene for Hashimoto's, so you couldn't have inherited it from your ancestor, because it now runs in your family, you're told that you had a genetically inherited disease, and now you have to subscribe to a lifetime of medication. Instead of taking a step back and saying, well, what would have called my immune system to that site? And look at the incidence of heavy metal toxicity, mercury poisoning in Hashimoto's. And look at the amount of lead and mercury poisoning in Hashimoto's, because the thyroid has an affinity for heavy metals, and very often when they retreat into the thyroid, the immune system will chase them there. And look at the genesis of a lot of Crohn's disease. I mean, a lot of Crohn's disease has to do with the disruption of the single cell layer in your gut that allows bacteria and other pathogenic contents that should stay inside the luminal wall of your gut. They leak out, and they're in an area that they don't belong, and the immune system is attacking them there. And then we want to hold the immune system responsible for the crime and say, hey, we're gonna arrest the police officer for what this criminal did. I mean, those contents are in areas of the body where they don't belong. And so we're going to put you on an immunosuppressant, or we're going to put you on an anti-inflammatory, and we're actually going to stop the immune system from protecting you. Instead of saying, what contents could be leaking from my gut that are causing the immune system to light up? And you could just keep going through lots of autoimmune diseases like this, multiple sclerosis, a lot of these conditions. But mold, mycotoxins, metals, parasites. If I was ever told that I had an autoimmune disease, I would not accept it until I'd done those kinds of tests.
Interesting. So back to the narrative of HDL and LDL. How did it get formed that LDL is the bad cholesterol?
Because the majority of people that had high LDL cholesterol also have high other factors going on in their body. And just like a lot of these randomized clinical trials, we look at things in isolation. We study one thing in isolation. One of the worst things we do, in my opinion, in modern science is study human anatomy or human physiology or biochemistry in isolation. So we say we're going to take a cell out of the body, we're going to put it in a lab, we're going to look how it behaves in a petri dish, and then we're going to assume that when I put that cell back into the body, it's going to behave the same way. And so we didn't solve for all of these other factors. Well, what was the person's insulin level? What was their fasting glucose? What was their hemoglobin A1C? What were their other inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, creatine phosphokinase? What were the other lifestyle factors that were going on? And what you'll find is correlation between high levels of cholesterol and people that have cardiovascular disease, but not because of the cholesterol, because of all of the diet and lifestyle risk factors that go around it. But we can build a multi-billion dollar, in fact, $1 trillion industry by just lowering this one biomarker. And when we lower this biomarker, if that biomarker was directly linked to all-cause mortality, if it were directly linked to the incidence of cardiovascular disease, then we would see in the population where we lowered this biomarker, we would see an extension of mortality, right? Because we said this biomarker was high, LDL. So if we lower it with statin, then we're going to see an extension extension in mortality. And lo and behold, we see no extension in mortality.
So how's it continue to be used?
Because it's continued to be marketed that way. You have to understand that there's a box that is called the standard of care, and I don't subscribe to the fact that physicians are trying to harm you. In fact, I have deepest respect for people that are licensed to practice medicine, because I'm not one of them, and you know, they go through a schooling to learn to practice within something called the standard of care. If you're outside of the standard of care, your malpractice is at risk, your reimbursement is at risk, your career is at risk. So you may very well be doing something that is in your scope of practice, but it is outside the standard of care. So most physicians will migrate back into the standard of care. So even if you go around to a bunch of allopathic doctors and get multiple opinions, they'll all be within this box. When you jump outside of that box, you've got to be talking to somebody who's willing to say, okay, you probably have to pay me cash. You probably have put my malpractice at risk. I don't have malpractice coverage for this type of treatment. Not because they're breaking the law, but because they're not within the standard of care. It's just like when physicians started to prescribe ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine for COVID when it wasn't the standard of care, even though there were millions and millions and millions of scripts written for